Today, our exclusive guest is Ian Lesser, who is joining us from Brussels. Ian Lesser is the Vice President and Executive Director of German Marshall Fund in Brussels. Ian, thank you very much for giving your time to us and for granting this interview. We know that you are a prolific writer on Turkey and you published many analytical pieces about Turkish government's assertive foreign policy in the Middle East, in Syria, Libya, and it's even trying to extend its arms to Lebanon as well. But now we see that as a shock for many, it suddenly became part of the Nagorno Karabakh conflict. Why is Erdogan doing it?
Well, first of all, thank you for the invitation. It's good to be with you. And you're right to point to this much more active foreign and security policy from Ankara. Turkey is a major regional power, but in the last few years, it's come to play a much more active role. If we go back, maybe a decade ago, it was much more economic and political. Today, Turkey has been using its military power, and it's quite substantial military power, actually, in much more direct ways. And that was true in Syria, in Iraq, in Libya, in the Eastern Mediterranean, where there is still a great deal of tension. And of course, now most recently over Nagorno Karabakh. And, so this is all part of, I would say, a much more active and much more forward-leaning Turkish policy in its region. And that, of course, is combined with a very special feeling that there exists inside Turkish society about Azerbaijan. There's a sense of affinity, which is really very unusual for Turkey. So we can talk more about that. But I think a lot of this is driving this very unusual activism.
Yeah, is Turkey trying to stay permanently in the South Caucasus and play strongly as a major actor in all affairs, wars, conflicts, or this was just driven by domestic consideration to appease its constituency, to show them that Turkey is standing behind their brothers? What do you think?
Well, this is a moment of real nationalist sentiment in Turkey. Of course, the nationalist sentiment in Turkey has always been very strong, and Turkey is not alone in that. In the entire region, there's strong nationalism. But, there are many places where Turkey is now engaged, really many more than in the past, if we include also, obviously, support for Northern Cyprus and so on. This one is in a way kind of unusual because it's not an area where Turkey has been engaged actively before, at least not with direct military means, or such overt diplomatic and security support. But it also comes against a background of accumulated interventions in different places. And Turks themselves debate whether Turkey can sustain that kind of presence in many places. I don't think Turkey is looking for a permanent, certainly not a permanent presence in the Caucasus. I think Turkey is looking for a permanent or sustained influence in the Caucasus. It feels it's its right to have that along with Russia and others. But whether it's sustainable or not, we have to see.
And many Russian experts these days, like even there, a lot of talk shows. Maybe I don't know if you heard about these talk shows. Famous Kremlin propagandists are holding almost every day, talk shows. This famous Solovyov moderator who is bringing Zhirinovsky, all kinds of pundits to talk about Nagorno Karabakh, about Turkish expansionist policy, and they believe that Turkey is trying to fulfilling their dream of greater, Turan. What do you think about that? Are they really? I think when we see what Erdogan is doing in Middle East, one can assume that this might be a case indeed.
Well, I think it's easy to exaggerate this. Absolutely true that Turkey has a policy now that is so much more active than it was a few years ago, with a number of operational successes militarily in places like Syria and Libya. And I think that in a way emboldens Turkey in thinking about the use of force or giving others the means to use force more effectively around the region. Of course, historically, Russia and Turkey have been geopolitical adversaries. And this the Caucasus region has been precisely the place where they were most at odds. So there is a lot of history on both sides, both for Russia and for Turkey, great deal of sensitivity. And as I say, again, I would say almost more than any other place where Turkey is engaged, the Nagorno Karabakh dispute engages Turkish public opinion because many Turks feel a sense of kinship with Azerbaijan. In fact, when polls are done inside Turkey, Azerbaijan is just about the only place that has that kind of position in Turkish public perception. So this is a more than usually sensitive issue for Turkish national opinion. And, you know, President Erdogan, wanting to project a stronger image, a stronger reality of Turkish power, knows that this is going to resonate in Turkish society.
Yeah, and he's famous as being a denialist of any Armenian, I mean, he's trying to diminish, even as they put it, massacre Armenians. And we believe that this is genocide. But he is denying in a very disturbing way. But that's not all. And I think Prime Minister of Armenia believes that why Turkey is coming to South Caucasus. He says that he's coming to finish up this annihilation of Armenians in the Caucasus. But he says that it's not emotional matter for Erdogan. It's a practical matter. He says that because Armenia is standing on a way of Turkish expansion to Caucasus and then to Central Asia and up to the China, where Uyghurs are living, and a lot of millions of Uyghurs are living in China. And what do you say about that?
Well, first of all, my own view is that anything that downplays the record of genocide is an error. Turkey has at times recently almost come to terms with this history, but we're now in a moment in Turkey where that's not possible to have that kind of an open debate again. And I think that's very unfortunate. I think this is much more about kind of realpolitik, about geopolitics, than it is about trying to rewrite history in some way. I'm not even sure it's really about kind of long-term aims of sort of penetration into Eurasia or the Caucasus. I don't think it's so much about that. I think it's about a generalized projection of what Turkey sees as its own right to influence across a very large region. On land, but also at sea in the Eastern Mediterranean, where in some ways it's not been so obvious in recent years. It has to do with policy in Cyprus and many other areas. So, I think it's going to be very hard for Turkey to sustain this. We didn't really talk about the economic situation in Turkey, which of course is very dire. These are expensive policies in some ways because they bring with them sanctions and other things. And it's going to be a real test to see whether Turkey can really sustain this kind of a role.
That's interesting. So economically, it's not a viable option for Turkey to overextend its projection in the South Caucasus, right?
I don't think so, because if you look at Turkey's overall situation, the country needs foreign investment. It needs the confidence of foreign economic partners, and every new engagement of this kind, whether it's in Nagorno Karabakh or it's in Libya or Syria, reduces the confidence of foreign investors and increases the political risk in Turkey. And I don't think that can be good news for the Turkish economy.
And it's also morally, it seems to me a very disturbing picture. They're coming, and actually their drones and even their airplanes or whatever military infrastructure they provided for Azerbaijan. And we see again Armenians being killed by Turkish weaponry. This is very disturbing images, and there's a flashback. All Armenians across the world, for them it's just a flashback to the genocide era where millions of Armenians were being killed. And you can see like hundreds of thousands across America are going out very strongly protesting. What do you say about that? Are Turks sensitive to these things, or they don't care about that?
I think probably many Turks are sensitive to these things, but the climate in Turkey at the moment makes it very difficult to have a debate over this. And there are differences. Turks have an active debate about Libya or Syria or Iraq policy. There's very little debate over policy in the Aegean or Cyprus. And I suspect also about this, because these are things that touch much more closely on Turkish public perception, the strong sense of nationalism and history and so on. So indeed, it's very difficult to have a debate about this inside Turkey. I think there's also probably a lack of proper recognition of the effect that this has, not just the images, but the reality of the intervention has on international opinion. You mentioned the United States, of course, but also in France. And this is at a time when Turkish relations with the European Union, with the United States, are deeply troubled. This is only going to add fuel to the fire and make those relationships even tougher.
And Ian, another question about Russia. What do you think? Would Russia allow this to happen? Was it surprise to Moscow, or they had some kind of understanding before they deployed their might behind the Azeri army? We know that in July, July, I think, if I'm not mistaken, they started joint military exercises with Azeris, I think after July, and they deployed a lot of troops and also some heavy machinery, military equipment in Azerbaijan, and many believe that they never pulled that out. So do you think that Russia is allowing this to happen? It's like both sides are trying to not to bother each other that much. But what's your opinion on that?
In general, in different areas.
I'm sorry, it's Russia's backyard, and Turkey is playing heavily now, and militarily, politically, and this was not imaginable. You couldn't imagine this.
It's very
back
surprising,
10 years
and
ago.
it's quite possible that Moscow was taken in a way by surprise about this. Not about the long-standing sort of military relationship between Turkey and Azerbaijan, or indeed the instances of a Turkish role of some kind in places like Chechnya and other areas that Russia cares deeply about. So there's a historic sensitivity there, and some of it is not very old, some of it's recent. But there are a lot of places now around the region, a big region, where Russia and Turkey could come to blows. In fact, they're not on the same page. In Syria, in Libya, there are a number of examples of this. So, there is a kind of accumulated weight of competition between Russia and Turkey now. There's also, of course, a very important commercial relationship. There's a very important, even arms transfer relationship. Turkey has recently bought important, surface-to-air missile system from Russia, which is controversial in the West. So it's a mix of cooperation, toleration, competition, possibly with some surprises yet to come, because surely this is not in Russia's interest to see this kind of a serious Turkish involvement in Nagorno Karabakh.
And do you think, how would this conflict end? And we see a lot of suffering on the civilian side, and people are being driven out from their homes, from their houses, villages, towns. And we see a lot of people are being killed now on both. We have enormous military casualties on both sides. And what do you think? How do you imagine this? How this conflict could be solved? I mean, this particular war. Do you think it will end soon, or this will continue on and going on? And Turkey likes this situation. What's your opinion?
Well, I think even Turkey probably would agree that they would like to see this situation limited. I don't think anyone wants to see a wider conflict in the region. And of course, it's tragic enough already. It's the kind of, in the West, there's this tendency to call it a frozen conflict, but of course, it's not really been frozen at all. And we haven't been paying a lot of attention for some time. And now, there are many, many distractions in Europe. Obviously, in the United States, we face an election coming up. There are all sorts of reasons why world opinion has not been focused on this in recent years. But now is obviously a time to focus on it. Can we solve the situation? As you say, maybe not. I'm not optimistic about that. Can it be stabilized? Can the crisis be managed? Can the human costs be reduced? I think that's all very possible. But it does require, that regional powers are not fueling it, and that larger external actors like the United States and the European Union take a much more active role. And at the end of the day, it's going to be for Armenia and Azerbaijan to figure this out themselves, but others can help to stabilize the situation in the meantime.
The Azeris are trying somehow to force OSCE Minsk group. There's a group that is supervising all these talks, mediating the talks between two sides. They're now forcefully trying to urge international community to make Turkey part of OSCE Minsk group. Like instead of 3 countries, they are asking to add also Turkish and Turkey. What do you think? Is it? But on the other hand, we see that France, US, and Russia are not willing at all to allow Turkey to become part of that troika.
Yeah, I think it would be very difficult to add Turkey into this equation. Although having Turkey as part of the discussions probably is not a bad idea, because indeed we would like to change. Most people, most observers, most governments would like to change Turkish policy there. And we also don't want to see the Russians playing a more active role, even more active than they're already playing. So, there is an interest in at least the strong engagement of some of the key parties already in the Minsk group to make sure that the situation can be addressed. Is it useful to have a kind of understanding with Turkey as part of this? Probably it is. But there are preconditions here, and it seems to me the preconditions are that regional actors aren't actively fueling the conflict on the ground.
Ian, there are so many misunderstandings between all these structures, European, EU, between EU and Turkey. They are partners, between NATO and NATO member Turkey. There's so many problems, and Turkish move recently against the Greece and France's anger, French anger. What do you think? I mean, why is Erdogan doing this, confronting the whole world? What's his end game here?
Well, there are different views about this. I mean, many Turks will tell you that this is part of the domestic political equation inside Turkey. President Erdogan is very good at playing this nationalist card, but of course, it's an environment at the moment that's very tolerant of nationalist policies, and so he's playing along with that. But it's widely supported. I mean, I think one shouldn't be too cynical in interpreting it. I don't think he's doing it purely out of sort of cynical politics. I think there is something genuinely felt on the part of the Turkish policy establishment as well as the public in certain key areas, in the Aegean, over Cyprus, and over relationship with Azerbaijan. I think it's in a way less about the dispute of Nagorno Karabakh itself than it is about this sense of affinity, which is very long-standing with Azerbaijan. So under these conditions where Turkey is looking for a wider role, it would have been very difficult for Turkey to sort of stand aside entirely from this situation. Does it need to play the kind of role that it's playing at the moment? I don't think so, and I don't think that's very helpful. But from the Turkish point of view, they see a set of successes that have come out of this kind of an active policy. They see that in Syria, they see that in Libya, and it is emboldened a certain forward-leaning policy towards Nagorno Karabakh. Again, that President Erdogan will judge that this could be pushed too far, because obviously there are risks in this for Turkey as well. So I don't think it's a foregone conclusion that Turkey is going to keep pressing on this until there's a kind of victory for Azerbaijan in the situation. I think at a certain point, Ankara probably will judge that it's wise to stop.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and many experts believe that this war, it's not winnable. You can't win this war because the other side will never surrender. So the only solution here is to start talking to each other and to find negotiated solution based on Minsk Group principles that they already on the table. It was already well-established principles of solving this conflict, and they both sides agree. But there's ceasefire, but they violate ceasefire, and the non-constructive role of Erdogan is that they are calling, they're pressing Baku to continue push on the field, on the battlefield. They say that you have to take all and then start talking. What's your opinion on that? They're absolutely misbehaving in this international call to end in the environment of when everyone is calling to put down arms and to start talking. They're pushing Baku to continue to go on.
Yeah, Turkey is entitled to its interpretation of the situation in Nagorno Karabakh, and the sense of support for Azerbaijan is not going to change. But there is a very fair question as to what point where this becomes counterproductive, not just for regional stability, but for Turkey itself, actually. And of course, as bad as the regional flare-up is the wrong term, really. It's a tragedy that this crisis is spun out of control. As bad as that is, it would be even worse if major regional actors came to blows over this, Russia and Turkey, for example. And imagine the kind of dilemmas that would pose for NATO, where most NATO allies don't agree with what Turkey is doing. But if there was a territorial threat to Turkey coming from Russia, NATO might be asked to intervene in that. You can imagine how difficult a dilemma that would be for Turkey and for NATO. So, getting to anything like that kind of a situation would be very, very dangerous. And I think it gives everyone incentives to come to the table and try to, as I say, at least stabilize the situation, if not to solve it, which is a much more difficult problem. After all, if you look around, there are many examples of conflicts that are not solved, but they're also not violent.